Welcome to our Behind the Raise series with me, Drummond Gilbert, where we learn about what goes on behind the scenes from successful fundraisers. I'm delighted to welcome Rav Roberts, founder of medsii.
Thanks, Drummond. My name's Rav Roberts. I'm the CEO and co-founder of medsii, also available at medsii.com. We're a UK-based health tech, and we provide targeted and timely medicines and health information using artificial intelligence.
Great. And can you tell us about how you came up with the idea for medsii?
Yeah, the three co-founders met about 16 years ago at business school in London during our MBAs, and we kept in touch over the years. And during that time, I actually developed diabetes. And one of the other co-founders was working at the MHRA as a regulator. And we got together at an alumni networking event with a CTO that I'd actually co-founded an Internet of Things company with. And that was where the idea was born.
Can you tell us why you decided to raise for funding and how much you decided to raise?
Yes, so we actually launched the business about a year ago. That's when we went live with our native apps on Android and Google and our web app. And we tried fundraising for about 6 months before that, and we weren't really getting anywhere. I think the big lesson is you probably need to have a good product in place before you start to fundraise, unless you've already been a successful founder before and you've developed that network of connections and that credibility. So, you've made millions from an exit, basically. So we didn't have that. And what we found was as soon as we launched the product, and of course, as soon as we started using the angel investment network, especially, we actually started to drive more conversations. We had meetings. And then what happened was, it was quite interesting. After quite a few meetings and quite a few no's to start with, we started to get some yeses. And what happened is that snowballed. And we actually had to think about, how much do we want to raise? We don't want to raise too much at a low valuation, because then first of all, you give away too much equity for what you're raising. And secondly, and very importantly, there's not enough equity left for future investors.
Really interesting, Rav. So can you tell us a bit in terms of how you actually came up with the valuation that you ended up using?
Yeah, so basically we modeled it in Excel. We modeled our future target revenues, how that's going to grow over time, our user growth as well. We modeled that. And we looked at industry comparables, so other startups that are raising seed rounds, pre-seed rounds. And we talked to potential investors as well as to what they'd be comfortable in investing at. And what we found was quite interesting, but we settled on a valuation. Now, in the UK, some people have told us that valuation is quite high, but elsewhere, many people have said it's quite low.
Cool. Let's dig into that. So in which places did you find that kind of investors were saying that kind of your valuation was low? And what were they interested in?
Very interesting. So it was mainly the UK investors that we spoke to that thought our valuation was slightly on the high side to start with. And the reason that they gave is they like to de-risk seemingly more than other investors. They like to see revenues coming in and of course growing. Now we're a pre-revenue company. So we didn't have that. The investors, especially from the US, but even in Europe that we had, and I've got to say, the really great investor we found on your network is from Germany. They were more interested in the future potential of the team and what we're going to be doing. Is it something that's compelling? Is it going to change an industry? And especially the investors in the US and in Europe, they believed in that.
So what's your biggest bit of advice for an entrepreneur like yourselves who maybe is kind of like pre-revenue and is just kind of working out how to get their business funded?
Well, my first bit of advice is never give up. Okay, so you've got to keep going, and it's a tough journey. We got loads of no's before we started to get yeses, and we're still getting loads of no's. So you've got to brush that off and just keep going and be positive and believe in what you're doing. But you've got to have a believable mission. You've got to believe in it yourself. And all of the co-founders that do that. So that's number one. Number two is you've got to tailor your presentation to the people that you're presenting to. Seems obvious, right? But I found out when I was presenting, I was doing pretty much the same pitch to start with. But then you get to learn that the UK investors and the US investors are very different.
Could we dig into that? So if you were doing your pitch for a US investor, what kind of things would be different compared with like your pitch for a UK investor?
Yeah, great question. So I actually had training from some US VCs, and that was given free of charge by Silicon Valley Bank and Barclays as well. Now, what the advice that we got was, when you're pitching to US investors, especially Silicon Valley ones, you need to forget about being reserved and humble. You've got to be actually a real go-getter. You've got to believe in your mission. You've got to be very positive, and you've got to bring that out and tell everyone how great you're going to be. Now, that's very difficult for someone like me from the UK, but that's the way you've got to do it. And you've got to practice, practice, practice.
Great advice. Thanks, Rob. So I gather you kind of raised investment during the pandemic, and a lot, if not all of your kind of pitching was over Zoom. So do you have any sort of hacks, like top advice for people who are having to pitch investors either over Zoom or on video calls?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. Previously to this company, I founded a couple of other ones, and I did in-person pitches, which I find a lot easier. But yeah, as you said, over the last 12 months that I've been pitching, it's all been over Zoom. What you have to do, and I just said it, you've got to keep practicing, practicing, and practicing, so it just comes out naturally. You've got to get your key messages and make sure that potentially resonates with the audience. So know your audience and what you're going to pitch.
Great advice. Thanks, Rob. What about creating FOMO? So I mean, I gather from what you're saying that it was kind of hard to kind of like get it started, but obviously you went on to kind of successfully raise investment. What did you do that kind of really got investors sort of over the line and sort of like fighting to kind of invest in you?
Yeah, well, we kind of did that by accident, just because we started to build some momentum with lots of investors coming on board at the same time, but that wasn't by design. And I've learnt my lesson for the next time we're raising, which we're doing right now. We've just started our seed round, and the lesson is you've got to have a hook to get the investors interested. Something new that's just about to happen, or is just happening right at this moment, and you've got to get those meetings in the diary. Now, in the US, the way the seed stage companies or startups go about it is they get 8 to 10 meetings in the diary every day for 2 weeks. I haven't actually done that yet, and it's quite difficult to do that now over the Christmas, Thanksgiving period in the US. We've also got some US investors actually. So my advice is try and curate that list of investors and start to build some rapport with them. You can do that on Twitter, on LinkedIn, through the Angel Investment Network, and then start arranging those meetings. And that's what I'll be doing, to try and create that FOMO.
Excellent. Thank you, Rav. So let's dig into kind of metrics a little bit. So let's think of people who may be kind of like first-time founders, just learning the ropes at the moment. What are the metrics that they should be kind of thinking about to impress investors and kind of get investors on side? And particularly, it'd be great to kind of hear about your experience of specific metrics and KPIs that really kind of got your investors excited about the business.
Yeah, so we actually did something pretty clever to start with. We got into some startup programs with Segment, which is a great analytics tool, and Mixpanel as well, which means we can actually measure or more easily measure how user engagement is increasing and how our apps user base is increasing. So we've got an Android app, an Apple iOS app, and a web app as well. So we're actually increasing user growth. So the velocity of that increase is growing over time. And we're being very careful that it is, because if it isn't, that's a signal to investors that something's wrong, and obviously to the company itself. So user growth growing, and engagement, key engagement metrics are how long they're spending on the platform, how many articles are they reading, Are they liking the articles? Are they sharing them? All of these metrics are key, and you've got to show positive progress. Of course, as soon as you've got revenues coming in, then you look at user retention or subscription retention, the cost of acquiring customers, and the churn rate as well.
Thanks, Rav. And last question from me. So what would you do differently if you were going to do it all over again?
Well, what would I do differently if I was going to do it over again? I probably wouldn't do too much differently, actually. I think the best advice I've had is you've got to take the hits more easily, right? So at the start, when you start to get a lot of no's, they're not interested, something's wrong with your company, you do feel deflated and a bit rejected. And actually, all the successful companies have gone through that. Successful founders like Elon Musk, he's been talking about it, how many times he was rejected. Steve Jobs, all of these great founders, and they just kept coming back. So you've got to be resilient and bounce back, and that's the best advice that I can give.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Rav. Best of luck with medsii, and look forward to hearing how it all goes.
Thanks a lot, Drummond.